Hi, this is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video I'm going to be demonstrating how to make the easy cold-shouldered V-neck top. It's a free pattern on mooglyblog.com, and this top comes in 8 sizes, so you'll definitely need the printed pattern in order to make it. Please follow the link in the description, which will take you to both the right and left-handed videos, as well as the written pattern itself and all the supplies you need to make it. I'll be making this pattern with Red Heart It's a Wrap, which you can see right here. This is the Thriller colorway, although it comes in several other colorways, and of course you can pick your own. You also will need a D-hook. This one is by Brittany. A D-hook is a 3.25 millimeter, and then you'll need your standard tools. A tape measure is important because since it's a fitted garment, you'll want to get gauge. You'll also need yarn needles, scissors, and of course stitch markers. These are by Clover. You can see here I'm modeling the easy cold-shouldered V-neck top. It's a little big to get it all on camera otherwise, but you can see how it fits and how great it looks. Now, let's take a look at the written pattern together. Okay, here I have a copy of the printed pattern that I printed out for my own reference for today's video. You can see that it does include a schematic with the measurements for all 8 sizes in all the different dimensions. So you can use those to help you determine if you decide to follow a little different size, if you want a tighter fit or a looser fit. This will help you make those determinations as well. There are also some notes and helpful hints, so I just wanted to point those out, and some stitch substitutions that you can do if you like. I do recommend that you print out the pattern and then go through and circle the numbers that correspond to your size. You can see, since there's 8 sizes, they're written out small, medium, large, extra large, 2X, 3X, 4X, and 5X. So this pattern goes all the way from small to 5X, and every time you see a series of numbers like this, you should know which one it corresponds to your size in order, and then you can circle it, highlight it, whatever works for you. Also, I just wanted to point out that there are certain rows that are only made for certain sizes. So for instance, here, the first front shoulder all sizes starts with the same row, but then small and medium has its own instructions, and large to 3X has its own set of instructions, 4 and 5X have its own set of instructions there. So you'll need to read the pattern carefully and just make sure that you're following the instructions for your size. Like I say, this is where circling or highlighting comes in really handy. If you're familiar with the print friendly function on Moogly, you can also use that to customize your printout for your size. So after you've done that, then it's time to go ahead and start stitching. So let's do that together. All right, there are 2 stitch patterns used to make this top. We have this mesh right here. I can put my hand in it a little better so you can see. And this is just rows of double crochet and rows of double crochet, chain 1, skip 1, double crochet. It's worked from the top down, so we're actually looking at these stitches upside down right now. After that, it's simply rows of double crochet. So there isn't a whole lot of new stitch patterns to learn. If we take a look at this swatch here that I've made, you can see from the correct direction how this mesh pattern is made. It's a row of solid double crochet, then double crochet, chain 1, skip 1, double crochet in the next, and then double crochet across, working into each stitch and each chain space once, and then mesh, solid, mesh, solid. That's it. Like I say, after that, it's just double crochet. So you should be able to work these stitches by themselves. I do want to point out that in the written pattern, that row 1 does start, here, let me pull this back up. It does start with foundation double crochets, so I do have a separate tutorial linked out for that. If you haven't made foundation double crochets before and you're not overly familiar with working with really thin yarns like this It's a Wrap, then you may want to start by just chaining, chain an extra 2, and then skip the first 2 chains and double crochet across. Just make sure you have the correct number for your size in double crochets at the end, and that's really the important part. After that, you can start following the directions for your size. For the larger sizes, I believe large on up, there are a couple of rows worked evenly, just like in this swatch, before you start increasing to create the V-neck. Otherwise, for the small and medium, you just jump straight to the increases. So I want to demonstrate how those increases work now. All right, here I have a tiny swatch from the first front shoulder. You can see I've worked a few rows even, like I spoke about, and then I've started making the increases that are going to work down towards our V-neck. So I just wanted to demonstrate how those work because it's a basic 2-row repeat. Now, to begin this one, I'm going to start by making a chainless starting double crochet. Again, if you don't like the chainless starting double crochet, you can just chain 3 instead. I just think this gives a little nicer look. So I'm going to pull up my loop about to the height of a double crochet, put my finger on top, wrap around, go right into that very first stitch. There we are. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and pull through 2. So there I have my first stitch. Then I'm going to double crochet in the first stitch, that one we just made our chainless starting double crochet in, and then I'm going to double crochet in each chain space and stitch across. So by working 2 stitches in that first stitch, that's how we've got our increase for the solid rows. This would be, well, it just depends on what size you're following. So make sure once you've got those first few rows down and you figured out how the pattern works, solid mesh, this will be pretty easy to tell. It just depends on what size you're following. For instance, I made the size large, so I started doing these increases on row 5. Depending on your size, it might be earlier or later. But this is our increases for our solid rows. So I'm just going to continue double crocheting in each stitch and chain space across on our tiny little front shoulder here, and then I will show you how to increase for the mesh row. So now we're ready to make a mesh row with our increases. Again, I'm going to start with the chainless starting double crochet. So I just pull that up, go around, go down into that first stitch. Always a little delicate when working with very thin yarns, but I think it's worth the effort with this one because it really does give such a good looking stitch. Oops, get all those loops back on there. There we go. Finish that off. And then for this row, it is chain 1, skip 1, double crochet in the next, right up until we get to the end. This should be a pretty easy pattern, like I say, to follow. And you can tell that we're on our increase rows because when I get to the end here, following this chain 1, skip 1, double crochet in the next, there should be 1 extra stitch at the end, which is where we'll put our increase for this one. So I'm just going to continue doing a double crochet, chain 1, skip 1 on across until I get to that very last stitch here in just a moment, which we're almost at, which is the reason I made this tiny little swatch so you can see it all on camera. And I know that some of you don't like to follow written patterns, and I've tried to simplify this as much as I could for the video, again, without making an entire sweater on camera. And I apologize, but I just couldn't figure out a way to make this any simpler than saying you do have to follow the written pattern. There's just too many sizes here. I wanted to be able to make sure that everybody could make it, and hopefully this will help you enough to help you figure out the written pattern. And of course, I'm always available if you have questions as well. So here we are at the end, and you can see there's one more stitch right here, that chainless starting double crochet that I made at the beginning of the first row. So I know it's time to chain 1 more time and then just double crochet in that last stitch. And that gives us our increase for those rows. So according to the size you're making, you'll need to repeat those last 2 rows several times. Just depends, again, on the written pattern until you get down to where you're ready to make that V. Then you'll go ahead and break the yarn for this one and set it aside and make the second front shoulder. So let's take a look at that swatch now. Let's see, I've got that one right here, waiting and ready for us. And this one is essentially exactly the same as the first one, but in order to have the V meet in the middle, we don't want 2 angles going off this way. So this one just has the increases on the other side. So if we look at a solid row for our second front shoulder, we're again going to start with our chainless starting double crochet. Let me get that lined up here. Get that through our stitch. There we are. Okay, and then we're going to double crochet in each chain space and stitch across until we get to the end. Remember, this is going to be the opposite of the first shoulder we did. In the first shoulder, when it was a solid row, we had our increase at the beginning of the row. So for this one, we're going to have it at the end. So I'm just going to work as if it was an even row right until I get to the very end of this row. So I will see you there in just a moment. Okay, so far I have just crocheted evenly across and worked into that last stitch once. Very simply, just like we did at the beginning of our first shoulder, we're just going to put a second stitch in that last one. Just a second double crochet, and voila, we've got our increase for the solid row. Then we need to work our increase for the mesh row, but of course this is now going to be at the front. So You can again start with a chainless starting double crochet or a chain 3 if that's what you prefer. So oops, these can be a little fiddly. Like I say, they definitely take a little extra care and time, but just makes such a nice finished edge. There we go. Then you can chain 1 and then just double crochet right in the very next stitch. So we don't want to skip one right here because this is our increase, like so. Then we can go back to our mesh pattern where we chain 1, skip 1, double crochet in the next on across. So then it's just back, like I say, to that stitch pattern until you've worked your way across. Then after you have finished all the repeats for this shoulder, which should be the same number of rows as you had in your first shoulder, you won't want to break the yarn because we'll be attaching our 2 front shoulders here together. All right, so after you've made both of your front shoulders, then it's time to join the front shoulders, and this instruction is the same for all sizes. Although, as you'll note, of course, the stitch counts will be different depending on your size. What we're going to do is take our second shoulder, and this is just, again, my little sample piece here, and we're going to start working back across it as if it was another solid row. So you can start with your chainless starting double crochet, or here, I'll go ahead and start this one with a chain 3. Just for the sake of time here, and for those who want to go ahead and use that stitch. And then I'm just going to double crochet in the next chain space and each stitch across, just like I was doing before. The big join will happen when we get to the center where we want to match up those V's. And this is also why the instructions for those 2 shoulders are different. Rather than flipping one of them, which I could have done, I wanted to work the increases on opposite sides so that the stitches would go in the same direction after they're matched up, and you wouldn't have sort of an odd opposite look on the other shoulder. Okay, so I've worked across that second shoulder until I've got 1 stitch remaining. This is where I'm going to join the first shoulder that we made. So I want to bring that up and match it up here so that I know that these stitches are all heading in the same direction. Here we are. And that my V's come to meet in the middle. And of course, on a full-size sweater, this will be a much more dramatic V. But what I want to do here is work a double crochet 2 together over this last stitch and this first stitch. So I'm going to yarn over and go into the top of this next stitch here. There we are. And I'm going to pull through 2, but then I'm going to stop with 2 loops left on my hook, yarn over again, and then pick up this second shoulder. And again, making sure you're on the V side here. Go into the last stitch you made on that one. There we go. Pull my yarn up behind here, yarn over, pull through 2, and then finally with 3 loops left on the hook, yarn over and pull through all 3. So that is the double crochet 2 together that finishes off the bottom of that V. From there, we just work even again. We're going to double crochet in each chain space and stitch on across until we get to the end of the row. Now, depending on what size you're making, you may have a few more rows to add after this, but those will just be worked even in the same double crochet row and then mesh row, just as we were doing before. Again, like I say, this time just working evenly. You'll need to follow the directions for your size. For the, let's see here, for the sizes small through 2X, you'll actually go ahead and break the yarn after this row, but for the sizes 3X to 5X, you'll need to add a couple more rows just for length. So I will work my way on across here, and then however many rows you need to make for this front, when you get to the end, then you'll go ahead and break that yarn and set it aside, and then it'll be time to make the back and then join those together so we can make the rest of the body. All right, so when you make the back shoulders, all sizes have the same instructions, except of course for the number of stitches. So here I've got my tiny little swatch back. You should have the same number of rows as you had in your front, which I've got my little tiny front right here. So after you've got your front shoulders made and attached and your back shoulders made, then it's time to go ahead and cut color A, that center color of your ball, or honestly, if you're using a different colorway or you just want to start from the outside of the cake, of course you can do that too. But for this pattern, I worked from the inside of the cake out. So I'm going to go ahead and finish that off like so. Now that was the final row there. So I want to keep that down so it matches the final row of my front. What I need to do now is prep both the front and the back with some stitch markers so that I can attach the body. So if you're making the full size, or any size, I should say, they're all full size, but if you're making an actual adult size garment here, small through 5X, again, consult the pattern to see which stitches you should put your stitch markers in. Let me pull it up right here. You can see I've got it split across 2 pages here, but for the small, it'd be stitches number 23 and 99. The medium's 23 and 107, 23 and 919. And it just, oops, let's see. There's the last page. And it just continues on through the sizes. So again, check the written pattern for that. On our tiny little sample, of course, here I don't have that many stitches to mark it. But what we're going to do is basically we're leaving some space here for the sleeves, and then we'll just be double crocheting and adding a body right here. So let's go ahead and add some stitch markers to our little sample so we can pretend that's a full-size garment now. I'm just going to count in, let's see, just a few stitches here on each side. And of course, you'll be doing this on both the front piece and the back piece. And again, I'm just sort of eyeballing this for the sake of time here, but you'll have exact stitches to mark with your stitch markers when you make your full-sized sweater here. So that looks about right. Let's see here. Maybe not exactly perfect, but close enough for demonstration purposes. And then what you need to do is take your yarn. And of course, if you've made this full size, you may have gone through 2 cakes in the center, depending on how big a sweater you're making. You may just need 1 to get up to this point. But when it's time to make that next section and start our body, we're going to want to move to this center color. So whatever you have left in there, you can just very carefully start pulling the rest of that yarn on out of the cake. And you can see it actually comes out pretty easily here. I've got that darker color right there. I want to separate and keep that out as much as possible so I don't make a big mess of it. All right, and there we are. I actually found the join. You can see the join there. It's just tied together where it changes colors. So you can just use your scissors or even give it a good firm tug and then set whatever's left of that first color on a side. And then you can start working with the next color. So to begin joining the front and back, I like to start with a standing double crochet. Now you can start with just a join and chain 3 if you prefer. But what we want to do is, of course, we're going to start working this way again. We're working top down. So I'm going to use my standing double crochet in the first marked stitch on the back shoulder piece from the right side. So you want to make sure you're working on the right side of the fabric, which is the same side as your solid rows are worked, as you can see right here. So I am going to standing double crochet, which just means I've got a separate tutorial for this too, again, but I'm just going to hold on to the end here. I'm going to yarn over twice and go right on into that first marked stitch, like so. Then I'll yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2, and then I'm just going to double crochet on across in each remaining stitch. And we're just going to double crochet until we get to that second stitch marker, and then of course double crochet in that marked stitch as well. Okay, so I've double crocheted all the way across to my second stitch marker on the back piece. Now I'm going to chain for my armhole, or if you want to be honest about it, it's the armpit. So we're going to chain however many it says for the pattern for your size. The small, medium, and large, it's 15. The next 3 sizes, it's 20. The last 2 sizes, it's 25. So whatever size you're making, you'll want to chain that number on across. I'm just going to do maybe like 6 here for the sake of our tiny little sweater. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That seems like a good number. As soon as you've got the number of chains for your first armpit here, then we're going to move to our front piece. And I want to next double crochet in the first marked stitch of the front piece. Again, from the right side. We want all these stitches to be worked from the right side of the sweater. So I will go ahead and get my hook in there. If the stitch marker is in the way, of course, you can just go ahead and take that out now. We won't need it after this round. And this can be a little fiddly. It helps to hold all those loops right down next to the stitch so that this stitch doesn't get all stretched out. If you need to retake it a couple times, that's fine. So after we've double crocheted in that first marked stitch of the front, then again, we just double crochet on across until we get to the second marked stitch. So I will see you when we get to there. Okay, so once you get to that second marked stitch, this one I had to take the stitch marker out to get my hook in there, then you're ready to make your second underarm or armpit. So we're just going to chain the same number that you did for the first one, just depending again on what size you're making. Since I used 6, I'll use 6 again. 4, 5, and 6. And then what we need to do is join to that very first stitch we made on the back. Now you want to make sure as you do this that you're not twisting those chains in the first armpit area, in the first underarm. So just make sure those aren't twisted as you pull this one around, because we're going to join now and be working in the round for the rest of the pattern. So you can go into the top of your chainless starting double crochet or your chain 3 or whatever stitch you began this one with, whichever you prefer, of course. Oops, I pulled up my loop a little big there, not a big deal. I'm just going to pull that down tight and make the slip stitch. There we are. Okay, so after you've finished joining, then you're ready to begin round 2 of the join front and back all sizes section. Now for this one again, you're going to start with a chainless starting double crochet or a chain 3 if that's what you prefer. So I'm just going to make a chain 3 right now for the sake of time. But the really important thing is here, you're going to be turning and working back in the other direction. So that chain 3 you just made really just counts as your first stitch in the chain. So if you're working a chainless starting double crochet, you'll be working that into your first chain. And indeed, you'll want to work in each chain across, not in the chain space, but in each individual chain. So however many chains you made, whether that was 15, 20, or 25, you'll have that many stitches worked across in each underarm area. Then you'll just double crochet in each stitch around, work into each chain again, of course, for the other underarm, and then double crochet in each remaining stitch and join. Now, the reason we turn and work back the other direction is because this keeps our seam straight and far less noticeable. We won't get any sort of angles in our seams by turning. If you prefer, however, to work just in the round without turning, that's certainly an option. You'll simply have an angled seam. So just continue I keep saying single, continue double crocheting on around, and that's it. That's basically it for the rest of the pattern. You just double crochet around, join and turn, and double crochet around, join and turn, on down through the rest of the pattern. Eventually, of course, you'll want to switch to that last color in the cake, and again, that just depends on what size you're making, at what point you'll need to do that. I'm looking here at the pattern, and it looks like for the small, medium, just the small and medium, you'll have 20 rows of this color. For the next 3 sizes, you'll have 19, then you've got 21, 19 for the last 2 sizes. It's just how it worked out with the length. So again, consult the written pattern to see just how many rows of each color you'll make. So I'm going to go ahead and set this aside now, and we can take a look at the almost finished sweater. All right, so let's take one more look at the written instructions here. I demonstrated how to join the front and back with that round we did with the chains. You can see there's the chains for each of those underarm areas. And then we just keep working around and turn. You'll notice this is a big stitch count right here. We're going all the way around the body. So it will help. And here you can see the finished one. I've got that middle color and then our final color. It will help you keep track if need be. You can use stitch markers every so often to help you make sure you're getting all your stitches made and that you're not skipping any, because you want the sides of the sweater here. Again, this is why I show it modeled instead of the full thing on screen here. You just want those sides to be really nice and straight. When you get to the end of your final round of the last color here, after your final round of double crochet, the very final round will be simply chain 1 and single crochet all the way around. And that's it for the bottom of your sweater. But after you have finished all that body crocheting, we've still got some work to do back up here at the top. Here you can see the full-size sweater with our big full-size V that came down to that double crochet 2 together. But what we've got is we've still got our shoulders here unsewn. And this is where we turn it into a cold shoulder top. Now, a note about that. If you don't like cold shoulder tops, if you don't like your shoulders to be cold, go ahead and seam the whole thing, and then you'll be done. However, if you want to make it a cold shoulder top, we can seam just, let's see here, we're going to seam up just 2 inches on each side of the neckline. So this is the neckline right here. We want 2 inches right here, and we want 1 inch at the side of the arm opening. So that's down here on this side, and you'll want to use stitch markers or whatever to match these up. So you can see I've got a stitch marker matching these 2 end ones, and then I counted in to make sure I had the same number of stitches here so that I attached the right stitch on the back, make sure to count those out. You'll have to just do that for your size. And then, like I say, you can either seam the whole thing or just seam 1 inch at the sleeve and 2 inches at the neckline. You can see I've already done that on this side right here, like so. And for this, I used the mattress stitch, which here I'll demonstrate in just a moment on this shoulder. That leaves, though, this great little cold shoulder section here, which kind of drapes down. And then one of my favorite things about this style is that by leaving the bottom of the arm open here, not only is it a little breezier because this is a summer weight top, but it creates a really nice sort of fall here, right? And it's just really flattering, and it creates a pretty shape, especially for those of us who don't love to show off our upper arms. So let's go ahead and pull up some more yarn, and we'll do a little bit of seaming here on the second shoulder. Now this is where you'll want to pull back that color A, that first center color that you set aside at the end of making that top section. To seam something, you're going to use the sewing needle rather than a crochet hook, so we're going to have to cut off a length of yarn rather than using it directly from the skein, or what's left of that center color anyway. Thread it on your yarn needle here, like so. And then to make the mattress stitch right here, I'm just going to go from the inside to the outside, so from the wrong side to the right side, into 1 stitch. And I want to leave a good length of it behind here for sewing in that tail later. And then I'm going to find the matching stitch on the other side. So let's see here. That would be this one right here. And I'm just going to come from the wrong side to the right side through that stitch and pull it up close. I'm not going to pull too hard or I'll end up pulling that tail through right now. I just want to get it a little close right there. Then I simply go to the second stitch, again from the wrong side to the right side, and then the same thing on the other side. It takes a little bit of time, but this really is a nearly invisible seam. So especially for a garment, I really like using the mattress stitch. And if you want to see more about it, I do have a separate tutorial as well for this on the YouTube channel and on the blog. And I will link it on the blog post for this as well. So once you've got a few of those stitches made, you can just pull on both ends. You can see it pulls those sides together really nicely. And as you can see over here on the finished one, if I can pull it up here, there we go. It really is just about invisible. So again, if you want more or less right here, this is just a totally personalizable part of the sweater, I guess. So you can have some fun with that and how you want to arrange the shoulders. After you've got them sewn, however you want them sewn, that's when you can do a little bit of edging, of course, and weaving in your ends. So what I like to do is just work a simple single crochet edging all the way around the neckline, gives it a nice finished edge. After you've finished up your neckline, then you can move over here and do a little bit of single crochet edging right around the arm opening as well. And if you like, and I included this in the instructions, you can switch colors to what's left over of your center color and work right across here. Because of course, when we switch down to that third color, you're probably going to have some of that center color to pull out and set aside, just as we did with that initial color, the one that was in the very middle of the cake. So after that, you'll be all done with your sweater. So I'll be right back with an all finished sweater to show you. Okay, and here I am one more time with my finished sweater. What do you think? That's the easy cold-shouldered V-neck top. I hope this video tutorial has been helpful for you for making your own. If you have more questions, please ask in the comments, and please do go to the description below the video. There you'll find the written pattern with all the numbers you need to make your own, and all the supplies you need too. So be sure to check it out. If you liked this video, please do give it a thumbs up and let me know what you think in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the Moogly YouTube channel. And click on that little bell next to the subscribe button to get notified every time there's a brand new video or whenever I go live. Thanks so much for watching and happy crocheting.